Uh, Marc Schieber is a professor of neurology and of biomedical engineering here at University of Rochester. His research focuses on how the nervous system controls muscles to perform dexterous finger motions. He's received an NINDS Javits Investigator Merit Award and has served as chair of the NIH Sensor Motor Integration Study Section.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak at this forum. What I would like to show you today, or talk to you about today, is first, what is neuroprosthetics? Then I'd like to show you the current state of the art, and then I'd like to talk to you about the needs for the future in terms of big data and data processing. Now it's late in the afternoon. It's the last talk before the coffee break. So I'm going to jump to number 2 and show you the current state of the art, which 60 Minutes did better than I can do. So I'm just going to show you a segment from 60 Minutes, if I can get it started, and hope you enjoy it. And it is going to
In a decade of war, more than 1,300 Americans have lost limbs on the battlefield. And that fact led the Department of Defense to start a crash program to help veterans and civilians by creating an artificial arm and hand that are amazingly human. But that's not the breakthrough. We don't use that word very often because it's overused. But when you see how they have connected this robotic limb to a human brain, you will understand why we made the exception. To take this ultimate step, they had to find a person willing to have brain surgery to explore new frontiers of what it is to be human. That person would have to be an explorer.
What I want to say is this work that you're going to see is done by Andy Schwartz and his group through a DARPA-funded program there at the University of Pittsburgh, by and
will
large.
continue in a moment.
I should have said.
The person they chose is Jan Sherman,
D!
a Pittsburgh mother of 2 and writer with a mind nimble enough to match wits on The Wheel of Fortune in 1995.
I'm going to solve the puzzle.
Go ahead.
Too cute for words.
Yes!
When her mind triumphed, her brain sent signals of delight to every muscle in her body. But a year after this moment, those brain signals were being cut off.
One day I had trouble. In the evening, I was making a lot of trips in and out of the car. It felt like my legs were dragging behind me.
Within 2 years, a genetic disease called spinocerebellar degeneration broke the connection between brain and body. Now at age 53, Jan Sherman can move only the muscles in her face and a few in her neck. She's dependent on a caregiver for nearly all of her daily needs.
52 across.
And her mother, to help her solve the puzzles she loves.
Healed? Oh, you're good.
At the same time Jan Sherman was putting her mind to a new life, a neuroscientist just across town at the University of Pittsburgh was imagining how people like Jan might be restored. Andy Schwartz, on the right, is working on an ambitious Defense Department project called Revolutionizing Prosthetics. 4 years ago, we visited his lab, and Schwartz showed us how he implanted tiny sensors like this one into the brains of monkeys and then wired them to a crude robotic arm. Schwartz told us that when the monkey thinks about moving his own arm, his brain cells or neurons fire off electrical signals. The sensor in his brain can pick up these signals and send them to the robot. So he's operating the arm in 3 dimensions, up, down, forward, and back.
As well as the gripper.
Well, what you're telling me is that the monkey is operating this arm with nothing but his thoughts.
Absolutely.
What are the chances that a human being would be able to do the same thing?
Oh, we think a human being could do much better.
That conversation was in 2008, and since then, the $150 million Revolutionizing Prosthetics program has reached farther than most thought possible.
Awesome.
Dr. Jeffrey Ling, a retired Army colonel and neurologist, is in charge. After seeing the wounded on several tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, he told his team that he wanted a breakthrough within 5 years.
Did any of them say, look, Colonel, we're not sure we can do this?
Oh, absolutely. They thought that we were crazy. But that's quite all right because I think it's in our insanity that things happen.
That madness led to genius in labs all across the country. At the Applied Physics Laboratory at Johns Hopkins University in Maryland, Michael McLaughlin led the multi-million-dollar engineering of what has become the most sophisticated hand and arm ever developed. It's the same size and weight of an average man's arm and hand. And everything is inside, including the computers and the batteries.
Is there anything that your natural arm and hand can do that the mechanical hand can't?
Well, I can do this.
Okay, there's that.
But other than that, virtually everything your natural hand can do, that this prosthetic is able to do. Same strength, too.
Same strength?
Same strength. So we can curl 45 to 50 pounds with the arm.
They've thought of a lot of ways to use it. When set on wheels, it can bring a human touch where no human can go. In this demonstration, we wore a visor that showed us the video feed from the robot. These gloves move the robotic hands, and we practiced pulling a wire out of a bomb.
Come on, give me that pinch.
There you go. Awesome.
But the holy grail in the project was finding a way to connect the robot directly to the brain.
Who wouldn't want to do this? When they told me, I heard about the study, I said, oh, absolutely. I couldn't not do this.
Last February, Jan Sherman put herself on the line for a more sophisticated version of the surgery that they had done earlier in the monkeys.
There's a brain surgery involved. It's experimental. Why were you so excited about it?
I've always believed there's a purpose to my illness. I didn't think I would ever find out what it was in my lifetime. And here came this study where they needed me. You know, they couldn't just pick any Tom, Dick, or Harry off the street. And in a few years, the quadriplegics and the amputees, it's just going to help. The Department of Defense is funding some of it for the vets. To be of use to them and service to them, what an honor.
What I'm going to do right now is I'm just making some marks here in your hair.
The procedure was done by University of Pittsburgh neurosurgeon Elizabeth Tyler Kabara, who showed us that the area that controls hand and arm movement is accessible right on the surface of the brain.
What are the dangers?
We worry about if we were to accidentally tear a blood vessel while we were putting them in, that we could cause a blood clot that would collect on the surface of the brain. Probably the thing we worry about the most is the possibility of infection.
I mean, you do have a connection through the skull to the outside world.
Absolutely.
May I have some irrigation?
During the 6-hour surgery, 2 sensor arrays, each the size of a pea, were placed on the surface of Jan's brain.
Woohoo!
Then, they were wired to 2 computer connections called pedestals, the gateways to Jan's thoughts.
You know, people are going to look at those pedestals in your skull and they're going to think, that has to hurt. Is it painful? Has it been difficult in any way?
For a few hours after I woke up, I had the worst case of buyer's remorse. I was thinking, oh my God, I had brain surgery. Why didn't anyone stop me? Why didn't they say, Jan, you're crazy? But as soon as the headache went away, that kind of talk went away too.
5 months after the surgery, we came back to see whether she would be able to control the robotic arm with nothing but her thoughts. They plugged her brain into the computer, and this is what we saw.
I can move it up and straight down and left and right and diagonally. I can close it and open it, and I can go forward and back.
That is just the most astounding thing I've ever seen. Can we shake hands?
Sure.
No, really.
Yeah.
Like, come right over here?
Yes, you come over
Okay.
there. Let me grasp your hand there. There we go.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And I can do a fist bump if you'd like.
That's amazing. What are you doing, Jan? What's going on in your mind as you're moving this arm around? What are you thinking?
Okay, the best way to explain it is raise your arm.
Uh-huh.
Go. Now,
Right.
what did you think about when you did that?
Well, not very much. I do it all the
Exactly,
time.
it's automatic.
Is that hard work? Are you having to concentrate?
No, it was hard work getting there. I struggled greatly to go up and down at the beginning. Now up and down is so easy, I don't even think about it. Side to side, don't even think about it.
Just like
Just like that.
your arms used to.
Yes.
We asked Dr. Ling, the program manager, where all of this is headed.
I'm old enough to have watched Neil Armstrong take that step on the moon, and to watch Jan do that, I had the same tingles, because I realized that we have now stepped over a great threshold into what is possible. And very importantly, what patients can now expect in terms of restoration. This is very important part, not rehab, but restoration of function.
I wonder what your experience with Jan has taught you about the brain and the brain's ability to adapt to new circumstances.
I think it's taught me something really fundamental, and that is we are tool users, and our arms and our legs are just tools for our brain. And so when we give another tool, in Jan's case, a robot arm, she will adapt to that tool to do the things that she wants to do.
Of course, many who could use a robot arm are not paralyzed like Jan. They're amputees, and for them, the project has found a way to connect the arm without brain surgery. 57-year-old Johnny Mathney lost his arm to cancer. Dr. Albert Chi from Johns Hopkins Hospital found the nerves that used to go to Johnny's hand and moved them to healthy muscles in his remaining limb.
Now, elbow extension.
Sensors on his skin pick up the brain signals from the nerves and use those signals to control the robotic arm.
Come here, I want to see you.
So even though the limb is missing, the brain still sends the signals as if the limb was still there.
Correct.
Johnny, it feels in your mind like your hand is there again?
Yes.
As if your arm had never been lost.
Correct.
Unlike Jan, the connection for Johnny runs both ways. Sensors in the fingers send signals back so he can feel what he's touching.
Okay, I'm holding the object. You can close on it.
To see how well, we put him to the test.
Hard or soft?
Soft.
Correct. Very good. Now let's try again. I'm holding the object. Hard or soft?
Soft.
Yep, quite right. All right.
He got it right every time.
Hard or soft?
Hard.
Amazing.
The next person to have Jan's surgery will have additional sensors placed in the brain to receive the sensation of touch. Andy Schwartz believes that will help with some of the things that Jan has trouble with.
Okay.
For example, sometimes when she looks right at an object, she can't grab it.
Okay, I'm going to take the cone away. Just go ahead and close it.
Oh, sure.
So as soon
no
as I take the
problem.
cone away, there's no problem. But as soon as I put the cone there, she can't do it.
Why is still a mystery. The progress is coming rapidly. They're working on a wireless version of the implant to eliminate the connection in the skull. And Dr. Jeffrey Ling told us that the lab experiments will one day enter the real world.
We're going to not stop at just arms and hands. I think that it's going to open the way for things like sight and sound. And in my dream that we'll be able to take this into all sorts of patients with stroke, patients with cerebral palsy, and the elderly.
I think when other quadriplegics see what I'm doing with the arm, they're all going to say, oh, wow, I wish I could do that.
That's the way I like to get cookies. Awesome, thank you so much.
I just feel very honored to be the one who gets to do it.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to see the bomb-diffusing robot known...
Okay. Okay, so this is the state of the art within the past 12 months. What I want to point out to you is that although that prosthetic limb has 22 mechanical degrees of freedom, everything you saw Jan doing, she's only using 7 degrees of freedom. So, for example, you have no trouble going like this. but all you saw that hand do was go like this. Okay, so that's the state of the art. So let me take a couple minutes and go back in time and show you sort of where this came from. Back in the 1960s, people started doing experiments on monkeys with the monkey awake, putting electrodes in the brain in such a way that the monkey could be awake and doing its business, and you could record neural activity from the brain. Ed Everett was one of the first people to do this in the what we call the primary motor cortex that controls movement of the body. And he very quickly discovered that there are nerve cells that transmit information about the movement of the body. So in this experiment, the monkey is moving his wrist back and forth. And this electrical recording from a nerve cell in time here shows that the nerve fires what we call action potentials, which are unitary all-or-nothing discharges. Sometimes we call them spikes. And the frequency with which the neurons discharge spikes transmits information about what's about to happen in the limb. So you can see that this neuron in time transmits spikes saying that the limb is going to start to flex. And if you load the limb with a weight so that the flexor muscles are going to have to work harder, this neuron fires even more spikes. When people like Apostolos Georgopoulos started to record while monkeys were making movements in more than two opposing directions, it became clear. So now here in these rasters, as we call them, each one of these little tick marks represents an action potential, all from the same neuron, and you're looking at multiple trial averages. Georgopoulos found that, yeah, if you were only looking at two movements, you'd see increase in movement for one direction, decrease for the other direction. That's pretty clear information. But when you started looking at directions in between, you saw there was a smooth variation. What that meant is that no individual neuron really transmits very precise information about what movement is happening, but you could collect information from a population of neurons. Here, the population of neurons is shown each as its own line, and decoding the information from that population, you could predict exactly where the movement was going to go. So this was all done with one electrode in the brain at a time, but when people started to realize that you could decode pretty accurately what was happening if you had a whole bunch of neurons, then we started trying to collect information from lots of nerve cells at the same time. So nowadays we can put lots of microelectrodes arranged on different kinds of arrays into the brains of animals, or as you saw, humans. This represents 320 electrodes in the motor cortex of a monkey. And you can use a couple of PCs and a bunch of data acquisition hardware, and you can collect data. This may not seem like very big data for many of you. My estimate is that when we're in our lab collecting all this data from that kind of monkey implantation, we're collecting about 17 megabytes per second, yeah. But there's a but coming. Here's what 64 channels look like with the action potentials. So this is what one of those spikes looks like spread out in time. Here we are monitoring this on 64 of the 256 channels. Spikes are not the only kind of neural signal that you can use. There's really a complete variety, there's a wide variety. And essentially, as you go from the microscopic level of recording the electrical activity of a single nerve cell out to the surface, you can talk about recording single neurons, recording multi-unit activity, that is multiple spikes without trying to distinguish different neurons, local field potentials, which is just the continuous waveform recorded from the electrode after the spikes have been subtracted away, electrocorticographic activity, recording from the surface of the cortex, electroencephalographic activity, recording from the surface of the scalp outside the skull. You can also use a magnetoencephalograph or even functional MRI to record whole brain activity. And then, as you saw, some people are working at recording peripheral nerve activity out in the peripheral nerves, or more exactly, as you saw, the activity from muscles that remain connected to the nervous system, or that are connected to the nervous system. My point here is that as you move from the individual cell outward, you're decreasing invasiveness. You don't have to stick the electrodes in so far into the body, but you're also decreasing the amount of information per channel and the spatial resolution that you have with the signals. So there's a trade-off there. The different kinds of signals have to be processed differently as well. The spikes are essentially, we treat as a point process, or essentially events in time. All you need to know about it is what time it occurred. And we can process those by just counting in every 10 milliseconds how many spikes occurred in each neuron. The continuous waveforms, like the LFP shown here, can be processed either in the amplitude or in the frequency domain. And you can see here in this spectrogram of frequency against time for this kind of signal. This is recorded when a monkey is reaching out, grabbing a sphere and turning it. And you can see that there's a burst of power here, a decrease in power here, and then an increase of power here. There's information in these power changes in different frequency bands about what is going to happen or what is happening. Okay, so the basic idea of neuroprosthetics then is you record lots of neural signals, you develop some decoding algorithm that will tell you what's about to happen based on all the neural channels that are recorded simultaneously. This is essentially a pattern recognition kind of problem, not terribly dissimilar from ones we heard discussed earlier in the day. Then you can use that algorithm to drive an artificial limb. If the artificial limb is sitting, or control a cursor on a computer screen, if that's happening off to the side, we call that open loop. On the other hand, you can close the loop by asking the subject to now use that prosthetic limb or that cursor to accomplish some sort of goal. Now, here's the but about in how many megabytes per second. The but is the brain, the motor parts of the brain, the neurons are discharging with a lead of roughly 100, 150 milliseconds relative to what's happening in the periphery. So if you want to have your neuroprosthetic system run in a way that's going to be satisfactory, all the data acquisition, the data processing, the production of the control signals, and the transmission of those control signals out to a prosthetic limb like that has to happen in roughly 100 milliseconds. So you saw the current state of the art. How much will it take to get better than this? Mikhail Lebedev and Miguel Nicolelis at Duke have sort of estimated this. And they estimate that with recording from a few hundred neurons at a time, which is where we are today, to really get good control of that modular prosthetic limb or something like it, is going to take an increase of about 4 orders of magnitude. And if you want to get really, really good control, like a professional athlete, then you've got to go up another order of magnitude. So we need to collect more data. Here is sort of their vision of, they're not limiting themselves to a single limb, and they're going into virtual reality, but I'm showing you this slide just to illustrate that here, with a magnetoencephalograph and functional magnetic resonance imaging recorded from a human, all they need to process the data in real time is a little blue gene supercomputing cluster. And then they can send the output control signals to a PRISM workstation, which will generate a virtual world, and that's the prosthesis that they're working on interacting with. Amongst other things, they're working on all sorts of things. So my point here, if I didn't say that, is in that video, Mike McLaughlin says something that's a little bit misleading. He says all the computation is within the limb, but really, in the video you saw with the woman, there's a bank of computers on the wall that she's really using. Okay. So where would we like to go? Well, as I said, we need to increase the data acquisition and processing by only 4 orders of magnitude from what we're doing now with a handful of PCs. But we don't want to stop there. We want all this hardware, both the data collection and the data processing, to be miniaturized so that it can be fully implanted into the human body. Then, so that we don't have anything exiting through the skin, which, as you heard, leads to a risk of infection, we want all this, at least the control signals that have to go to the prosthesis, whatever it may be, we want that transmitted wirelessly out through the skin so it can be received by the prosthesis, which then needs to have onboard computers to drive the control. And then the last little requisite is that it has to be fully mobile, you know. If you're going to put on your prosthetic limb in the morning, you want to be able to go all day. You want to be able to carry all the power supply with you, for not only for the motors, but also for all the computation that's got to go on. But that's where Jeff Ling would want this to go, right? He's not talking about having a prosthesis that you can use in your bedroom. He's talking about having something that you strap on in the morning, go off and climb a mountain. And I'll stop there and thank you for your attention.
Some questions?
Yeah, so isn't that kind of thing where an FPGA can be very helpful in terms of lowering the power and increasing the rate at which you can deal with data?
And I'm sorry, and what would that be?
An FPGA would lower the power substantially and increase the rate at which you can deal with data.
So I don't know what an MPGA is. I don't know what an FPGA is. Okay, yes. I think there are lots of bright people working on this kind of thing, but to make it, the challenge is that it not only has to be small and powerful and have low power requirements, it also has to then be encapsulatable, implantable, and you have to be able to send the information in and send it out. Yeah, I'm not, I mean, the trick is you want some way, however you're going to arrange it, so that you can have an implanted device, say, you know, on the torso, and a transmitter send information to the prosthesis. You don't want to have cables exiting through the skin to the prosthesis. And I mean, I think this raises all sorts of things. You know, if you're walking around and there's some sort of interference, how are you going to deal with that, right? How is your cell phone not going to take control of your arm, or vice versa, right? Okay, thanks very much. Enjoy the coffee.